I welcome everybody to a Canes Corner podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Gold. It's been a couple of weeks, but we have a lot of cool things in store for you as we get ready for training camp, which is basically a month in the offing. And then there's 6 preseason games, and then the Hurricanes will start the trek for playoff appearance 8 in a row in the Rod Brind'Amour era. And as I told you before the season started last year, it's a playoff team. Not that anybody is really doubting this group at this point, as they did a year ago, but it's a playoff team. We just have to figure out how good of a playoff team it is and what the landscape of the Eastern Conference looks like and the Metropolitan Division. Maybe some of those things will come up. We've got contracts, 4 big ones signed in this offseason, 1 to a free agent, 1 to it was sort of a restricted free agent that was traded for 2 entry-level deals still, and then 8 more years for a couple of more players, and we'll find out if Carolina closed the gap. To help me through this, you know Corey Lavalette, North State Journal, covers the Hurricanes, and honestly is everything to that online publication. And Matt Soma, who used to, I guess, started the Canes Prospects Twitter feed, and now has a Substack called, I think it's just Matt's Substack, which, great name. Here we go. We got Corey Lavalette and Matt Soma. I appreciate both of you. Gentlemen, are you ready to start your engines?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Low rev for August. How about that?
I will take that as a yes. All right. 4 big deals in the offseason. And I'll just list them in order of amounts in terms of average annual value. And then we're really going to start with the 2 entry-level guys who got big deals. You've got Nick Ehlers, the unrestricted free agent, 6 times, 8.5. We can discuss why it was 6 and not 7, not sure. K'Andre Miller, who was traded, acquired from the Rangers for a couple of draft picks, and Scott Morrow, 8 times, 7.5. And then the 2 guys we're going to start with, Jackson Blake, 8 times, 5.1 and change. Some of that money is deferred. Not some of the 5.1. That's what the cap hit is. There's more money than that. And Logan Stankoven at 8 times, 6. So I want to start with Jackson Blake. Corey Lavalette, North State Journal, at Corey Lav on Twitter. My comp for him as a player, and none of these are exact, is I actually think he looks to me to be an offensive piece similar to what Teuvo Teravainen was for Carolina. Maybe never be a big goal scorer, but a creative offensive weapon. I think this deal is going to look pretty doggone good, maybe even sooner than 2 years from now. I was a little confused that both he and Stankoven agreed to sign long-term to deals that figure to be more team-friendly than player-friendly. What are your thoughts on Blake?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's a nice deal for Eric Tulsky to tie down a guy that, is going to be a 20, 25 goal scorer probably, and will put up a bunch of points. He's not going to be that two-way force, I think, that Teuvo Teravainen. Yeah. But offensively, I think you're right. He's got, and I don't want to spook anybody, but he's got a little bit of that Jeff Skinner to him, right, where he can get to the middle of the ice and find ways to be elusive, to make plays and things like that, to keep the puck on a thread all the time. So disappointing playoffs for him. I think we'll all agree that he looked at times a little overwhelmed. But let's all remember, this is a kid who was playing college, 16 months ago or whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, it's a good bet to take. That's what this team is all about, right? Is making bets and hoping that your bets work out, more often than they don't.
Matt, what do you think about Blake?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see, obviously not the offensive upside that Braden Point has, but the annoying levels to play against. Blake, there were many games last year where you saw he's just constantly pestering the opposition, creating a bunch of takeaways. Like, I think that was kind of an underrated part of his game that really helped Carolina establish more of their forecheck. I mean, this is a guy that's 5'10" and probably 180 pounds wet, right? Like, he's not the biggest dude, but he just will not stop working. And I think he doesn't have maybe like the pace that a lot of other players have, but he definitely just keeps working. I think if he adds a little bit of muscle and, just as he gets used to the grind of an NHL season, I mean, he played twice as many games than he's ever played before last year. So I think once he does that, this is going to work out really well.
I thought Corey is a great point. I think even though he had 3 goals and 3 assists in the playoffs, I mean, it really was. He was sort of invisible. And for a kid who started the season on the 4th line, and I think going into training camp, I'm not sure how many people thought Blake had a chance to make the roster, but he absolutely, he left them no choice. You had to take him. He was too good. And he played his way from 4th line, getting second power play unit time, to being one of those guys that Rod Brindamore left home on the final road trip of the season. Like, we can't afford to lose him type of status for him, which was remarkable. He really did. He had a great rookie year, but he did. The playoffs were too much. I think that'll change over time because I think he has a shiftiness about his game. I think we've all talked about it. We've all seen it. Like, I'll just make a comparison to a current Hurricane. One of the things that Andrei Svechnikov is best at is getting the puck back, right? Puck retrievals. And I think that's one of Blake's biggest assets, and the ability to find people, to make a pass you don't think is there. And that's, to me, that's where the Teravainen stuff comes from. But I don't know. I'm such a huge fan. Let me get to Stankoven. Like I said to both of you before we started, my goal was to do this in 30 minutes or less. And I think we have almost no chance to get through all this in 30 minutes because I'm long-winded, as I've already proven. Stankoven, 8x6. And he also is a guy that gets to the middle. But, Matt, what chance do you give him of actually starting plays in the middle rather than ending up there?
I mean, I think with Stankoven, a lot of people are going to mention, he's only 5'9", he's 5'9", or whatever. But
if that.
Watch him play, and he plays harder than a lot of the guys that are 6'2".
Yeah.
I mean, and that's been something that has been the case since he was playing junior hockey. So I think he played center in juniors. He hasn't really played it as much as a pro. But just given the style that he has, I mean, I think I look back to his first goal with the Hurricanes. It was a net front deflection on a power play. He as a 5'9", if that forward, was screening the goalie. Like, that just shows you that he can get to those areas. I mean, I've projected him as a center option for the Hurricanes heading into this season. I think, there's a possibility, but I think it's worth a shot because, Carolina doesn't have a ton of great options for their second line center right now.
Corey, just piggyback on that, because I know you and I have both speculated what that position is going to look like, but see if you can do both. Talk about Stankoven, the player, and how he might fit as a center.
Yeah, I mean, it's an option they're going to look at for sure. I mean, I think, Seth Jarvis will be the other guy who will get a look there. And obviously they have Jesperi Kotkaniemi to fall back on if they want to go back to that again. That's proven to not be the best fit for him. But I think, you give it a shot, right? I mean, I hated to be like, well, Jackson Blake didn't play great in the playoffs because it kind of discounted everything that he did all year long. And you mentioned, Stankoven likes to get to the middle too. The big thing about these two guys is neither of them are scared. Right. Neither. Blake didn't play great in the postseason. He wasn't scared. We know Stankoven's not scared. I mean, the way that kid played in the postseason, the clutch goals he had, just all of that. How many times have people bet against this kid? Would you guess?
A lot. Yeah.
I'm not going to bet against him playing in the middle. I think Seth Jarvis has a better chance of doing that job. But as we know, I mean, we learned this when Rod Brindamore became coach. He was skeptical of Sebastian Aho being a center because he said he wasn't big enough. Now we're going, Jarvis is a little bit shorter, maybe about the same size. Stankoven's much smaller. So he's got to convince the coach, right? That'll be the big. I don't think Rod Brindamore doubts that guy's heart at all and his willingness. The question will be, can he do enough to prove, when you line up across from Alexander Barkov, can you muscle back a face off against, can you do it in practice against Jordan Staal? Hey, I had to practice against as far as strong centerman than number 11. So I wouldn't bet against him, but it's going to be an uphill climb. But here's a guy that's made a career, got a lot of money out of overcoming those hills.
Here's the thing about Stankoven and Jarvis as the choices to move to the middle. And I was talking to somebody the other day offline, off air, and I still said if I was going to lay odds at who Carolina's starting number 2 center would be, I mean, and numbering the lines for Rod Brindamore is difficult because we know Staal, Martinook, and whomever is playing on the right wing of that line is going to get plenty of ice time, especially at home because it's a matchup thing for him, and he's going to play them 16 minutes. So that's kind of their second line on home ice. The road will be a little bit different probably. But if I was going to lay odds as to who would be the starting center on that second scoring line, I probably would make Jesperi Kotkaniemi the favorite simply because we don't know if Jarvis or Stankoven will do enough in training camp in preseason for Rod Brindamore to go, sure, let's go. Let's go. Seth, you've got Nico Hischier. Yeah, I just don't know if that's going to work on opening night. With that said, the reason I think Seth would have a slight edge, and there are pluses and minuses to both, is because we know for a fact one of the reasons Rod never wanted to move Natchez to the middle. Well, there were two good reasons. One, he didn't believe he could play it. The other was he didn't want to lose the dynamic player he had on the wing. He knew he could have. So he didn't want to move him to the middle and lose that guy. Jarvis, I think, at the very least, stays the same. The same offensive player in the middle, and we already know that he is an excellent defensive player. It seems natural for him. I think Stankoven is a different type of defensive player, and I just think Jarvis could slide over to the middle if he can handle the physical pounding of it, because it is going to be different. That's why I think it's Jarvis, not Stankoven. But I am willing to watch both of them play center in the preseason, hopefully, and see what happens.
Well,
yeah.
Worried about losing that guy on the wing. The fact that you go and get Nick Ehlers opens the door for you to try something like that, right?
Yeah.
If neither of those guys do play in the middle, there is a really big glut on the wings. Like you're talking, we just talked about Stankoven and Blake. We didn't even talk about, Ehlers and Svechnikov and, go down the list, Taylor Hall, all those guys are going to have to find ice.
Right.
You want to give Jesperi Kotkaniemi ice over them. That'll be, part of that decision too, I think.
Thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on how long Jesperi Kotkaniemi's leash is this year. I think Carolina's tried in the past to get him to work as the second line center, and it's been kind of a mixed bag. He has he's pretty good in the defensive zone, and the offense has kind of been the one part of his game that's yet to come. And, if the Hurricanes can move a player like Jarvis or Stankoven to the wing or to center and have it, not really be a drop off, I guess, points wise, or even just offensive chance creation wise, I think, they might be more willing to explore that, because otherwise, you start having to dip into the, Mark Jankowski, Eric Robinson part of the depth chart to fill in at center where you might not need to otherwise.
Yeah, I don't think we want Eric Robinson. Playing center. I like Jankowski as a depth guy. I thought, I mean, obviously he had such an amazing start to his Hurricanes career, but he's a good, useful player. And I mean, I personally, if I was making a lineup chart today, and I did, because this is what people like us do, Rod Brindamore would hate to see it. Although I'm just going to tease this. I'm going to show it to him tomorrow. I've got Aho, Svechnikov, and Ehlers on a top line. Jarvis, Blake, and Hall. I'm not sure I love that, by the way, but that's what I have on the second line. Stahl, Martinook, and Stankoven. I love the way Stankoven fits on that line. He just plays just like them.
Yeah.
And I still have Kotkaniemi playing. I mean, I love Mark Jankowski, but a good version of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, I mean, I think he's better than Mark Jankowski. I mean,
Oh yeah.
different players, but I think he's better. And with Carrier and Robinson, I mean, I don't see why that line can't be a problem as a fourth line. Why that line can't be, one that, where you've got three guys who maybe combine if they were to stay together for 40 goals. I don't see why that can't be the case. Does that make sense to you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it also, there's some flexibility with that lineup. If you need to have a matchup where it feels like William Carrier might be better playing with Jordan Stahl's line, you could find a way to move maybe Taylor Hall on Kotkaniemi's wing, get more offense out of that line, and then add Stankoven kind of and his scrappy play to that second line there, right? I think that's kind of Rod Brindamore doesn't like to stick with consistent lines all the time. I mean, we've seen that, he typically has his top guys and their roles don't really change. But, Seth Jarvis was playing on a line with Jordan Stahl at times last year. So, he's not afraid to move players. And I think, Carolina's biggest strength is their depth and the ability of multiple guys to play in multiple different roles.
Yeah, thoughts on that lineup, Corey? I know it's a fool's errand to try to predict what Rod's going to do. But what are your thoughts on it?
I see it pretty similar to that. And to piggyback off of Matt, not only do you have the flexibility to change it up, this is a team that doesn't really change a whole lot how they play depending on what line they are. I think the first line gets a little more leash as to what they want to do. But after that, I think it's pretty bread and butter, and you can take any knife and stick it in there and and those guys around. So I mean, I feel bad for Jesperi Kotkaniemi in this situation because he's better than a fourth line center. Like I don't think you can make an argument that Mark Jankowski should play ahead of him. Put aside the Jan Gretzky era that we had there for a little while. But that's a great utility piece to have too. And if, injuries happen, I mean, Will Carrier's hurt pretty much every year, so we can count on that at some point. Injuries happen or like, you mentioned matchup, there's matchup situations or anything like that. I think, you have options now in the bottom of that lineup to do a few different things that, if Seth Jarvis can win that 2C job, it makes projecting things a lot easier, I think. If he doesn't, and it's Jesperi Kotkaniemi, now all of a sudden we're like, okay, who's playing on the fourth line? I mean, there's going to be a player that could play top six in a lot of markets in the NHL playing on the fourth line. And you can think of that as an embarrassment of riches, but there are egos to be stroked on every team, no matter how many times Rod Brindamore's or anybody on the team talks about how much the guys like each other and what a great room it is and how selfless everyone is. Nobody wants to play 9 minutes.
Right. Real quick. I just want to ask you this, Corey, because you were there. I don't think Matt, you were at the exit interviews. When Kotkaniemi came to the podium, he looked like a guy who was out of town, right? He just looked to me like a guy who had I got to get out of here. And I understand it. It hasn't gone like the first year. I mean, I would argue his first year was maybe his best year. I know he was probably more productive in year two, the year with the outdoor game. He had some enormous games, and then maybe the last half of the year it just went the other way. But I thought his first year, once they moved him to the middle, he looked like a player. Hey, they might have guessed right here. And it hasn't worked. And I know he feels as though other players get the benefit of the doubt that he doesn't get, including Andrei Svechnikov. I keep joking all the time on the show that nobody is gifted minutes. If Jesperi Kotkaniemi wants to play more minutes, he's got to earn that time. And I always joke, unless your name is Andre, who's going to get the minutes even when he doesn't. And maybe that's a blind spot for Rod, but I think it's an organizational blind spot, to be honest. We need more from Andre. But didn't KK look like somebody who was already one skate out the door?
I think he's such an easygoing guy, and I don't know if that's has always been his nature, or from what I understand, from where he's from in Finland is considered like the most easygoing, happy people that you can pretty much find, and that's kind of what he is. So I didn't get that impression.
Okay,
my big thing with him is that one of the things he said during that exit interview was, well, I was drafted as a big scoring center and I need to get to that point. And I think that's part of the problem is at some point you need to realize, everybody talks about it in the NHL. Everybody who played in junior, played, on their youth teams or played in college is a top 6 guy, a top 3 defenseman who gets to play on the power play, gets to, play all the important minutes. Not everybody can be that in the NHL. And I know he has expectations for himself, and that's fine based on where he's drafted and everything. But at some point you need to be like, well, that's probably not my path to be the best player. And so that was a disappointment. It's almost the right answer. You want a guy to say, I know I can do this. But to me, it was a little disappointing. I was hoping maybe mentality would be like, I need to carve my role out here. So yeah, and as to the Svechnikov stuff, I think you're right. He definitely the opportunities that maybe get taken away from other people. At the same time, as far as talent, there's nobody more talented on the team. And when things are right for the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, he is electric, game-changing player, and they need that. They need that all year this year because it wasn't there last year. He wasn't good last year.
Right, and that's why Rod always gives him the benefit of the doubt, because he knows he's the only player they've got that can do that. He can impact the game even without scoring. And actually 2 years ago, he did that routinely. He was a positive influence in games even when he wasn't on the score sheet. And last year, that was not the case. Matt, before I kind of bring us to our final subject, because I am determined to get this in roughly in 30 minutes. And we're shockingly close at this point. As somebody who's, dialed into prospects, what was Kotkaniemi like as a prospect? And, I mean, he obviously is not going to be that. But what are your thoughts on how he was projected to what he is?
I think, when he was drafted as one of those guys that was pretty pro ready, but maybe he didn't have the highest ceiling of some of the other guys drafted. It's kind of funny we talk about this. I spent a lot of today talking about the 2018 NHL draft, and in hindsight, that first round is horrible. A lot of guys did not pan out. Obviously like Philip Zadina, Barrett Hayton hasn't really turned out as well as he did. Like Ty Smith, Grigory Denisenko. There's a whole lot of guys that just really didn't work out. And with Kotkaniemi, he made, a lot of strong defensive plays. There was some signs of promise in his offensive game. It seemed like he was a guy that could have a ceiling of a second line center at the NHL level. Obviously, the returns at the NHL level have been more of the third line center-ish roles. And I think with him, he just hasn't really taken a whole lot of steps at the NHL level. I mean, there was consistent growth for a little while in Montreal, and then he kind of hit that, plateau. He had that first season where he started off a little slow, then got to the next hump, and that's kind of been emblematic of how he's been as a prospect, where he'll have really good stretches and then he'll kind of disappear for a bit. And I think, as a prospect, there were some concerns of that as well. Because if I remember correctly, he was kind of a pretty surprising pick at 3rd overall.
I remember having a conversation
You
with
were
Luke
Grant
McCaw.
McCann.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Nothing nice to say.
Carolina needed a center
Fair.
too, right? They needed a center in that draft. And now I remember having conversations with Luke Takako, a friend from the NNO, and he's like, I like Kotkaniemi. I like Kotkaniemi. They need a center. And I didn't argue with anybody. I do remember saying this, and then I want to move on to our final subject. I remember saying, had never seen any of them play. I knew Dahlin was great. I knew the Hurricanes didn't really want to draft a defenseman. Plus, they had so many defensemen, they didn't really need Rasmus Dahlin. So I was looking at all the forwards, and I'm like, man, Brady Tkachuk sounds like the guy that Carolina should draft based on the way he plays. Carolina needed somebody who was ornery, a pain in the ass to play against, and that seemed to be Brady Tkachuk. I love Andre. I'm not knocking the pick. Andre, if Andre can get to where Andre could be, then I don't think we will ever think twice about that pick, and he's got 4 more years left on his contract. By the way, on the low, the amazing thing about the work that Carolina has done with their salary cap is that they are almost entirely booked for not this season, but next season, and they still have $16 million in cap room. They only need a goalie and to sign Nikishin to have 18 skaters on the roster. My guess is Nikishin, I don't know. We'll have to see what he's going to be like this year, what kind of contract he gets for next year, because this is the last year of his entry-level deal. All right, final subject. I'll start with you, Matt. This is I could be missing something here, but I was looking at what Carolina needed coming out of last season to this season to try to close the gap on Florida. Goal scoring, preferably some goal scoring we could count on in the playoffs. Top right-handed defenseman, toughness, some physicality, and a second center. They certainly are better than they were at the end of last season. Has the gap closed?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, their defense got younger this offseason, for sure. I mean, I think Brent Burns obviously did a great job as a Hurricane, but, his best years are very clearly behind him. And, Dmitry Orlov really struggled in the playoffs, I think. You had Keandre Miller, who would have led last year's team or defense in hits, despite having a down year and being soft by Rangers fans that don't know ball. And then you had, I'm tempering my expectations for Alexander Nikishin. I think he had some really promising moments in the playoffs, but this is a guy who's still learning the language, still learning the system, and it's his first year in North America. I think he's going to play a role, but, there's going to be some bumps, but he definitely makes the team harder to play against. And so I think, that as a whole is going to help close the gap a little bit just by getting our defense a little bit more mobile, a little bit tougher to play against. And honestly, I think there's probably more offense with Miller and Nikishin than there was with Burns and Orlov. And then with Ehlers, the goal scoring helps. I think, he also is one of those players that makes those around him better. And that's somebody the Hurricanes need. I think Winnipeg is just one of those weird teams where nothing seems to go right for them in the playoffs, no matter how well they do in the regular season. And so I don't know if it's going to work out here. Maybe getting him out of Winnipeg is what's going to be the ticket for him. I really don't know.
Thoughts on that, Corey? On
Yeah.
Whether or not Carolina's closed the gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I don't know if we can say they've closed the gap and we should expect them to be, the favorite in the Eastern Conference. I think you got a 2-time champion, and that's the team you have to beat. But to your point about the salary cap and stuff, this is a team that's built for today and built for the future and to make more moves. And, you know, did they get a right-handed defenseman? No. Is Jacob Slavin that right shot defenseman now? Probably. So we'll see who fits up next to him. I think it'll start out as Keandre Miller, and that offers the opportunity for him to really blossom. I think, like, what player has not thrived playing next to Jacob Slavin? Like, we're going to learn about how much of a step Brent Burns lost this year, because he's not going to play with Cale Makar or Devin Tays. You know, he's going to have to carry a little more weight on a line than he had to. And that's not a knock on him, but playing alongside Jacob Slavin is going to, I think, if it's him, I think is going to really help him blossom and get comfortable here. And if it's not him, or in the future, it could be Nikishin playing with him. And if that's the top pairing, all of a sudden, you know, if this kid is everything that the team seems to think he is, and the steps he took in just those few games we saw him were really, really impressive. The team was shocked at how much he improved in those games. So it's exciting to think about what they could be on defense. It's crazy to think that, you know, 2 years ago it was Shea, Orloff, Burns, Pesci, and all those guys are gone. And you look at the defense and you're still like, wow, this is, you know, has the potential to be better on the power play. You know, I think Nikishin will be an upgrade on that second power play unit. I think he'll get that chance. You know, has a chance to be, like Matt said, more mobile, which I think is going to be huge. We saw them look a little slow at times. You know, Dmitry Orlov certainly had issues with that. And, you know, I want to stop on him for a minute, because he said some things since he's left about not really being happy. And I got to give him a lot of credit, because I never, ever, ever got that feeling from him. He was here. He handled it like a pro. If it was bothering, I didn't notice it affect his work ethic. Now, he didn't play great, but I give him a lot of credit, because he could have complained to me or to a bunch of other people, and instead he was, you know, down hard, and he helped Nikishin a lot out. That's a huge credit to him. People are going to have maybe bad memories about him. I pushed us past 10:30. So,
I loved, for the most part, I thought year one, slow start, but a great finish. I thought he and Chatfield, to me, were the best defensive pairing in the playoffs 2 years ago. And I thought Dmitry, unfortunately, when Dmitry was bad, he was so bad that it made you not realize maybe the next night when he was good, because he was so bad the night before. So he had huge swings in performance last year that I think it's, on the whole, I actually didn't hate him last year. I didn't think he was that bad last year. Real quick, and we're already at 33 something. My own feeling is that Nikishin's going to start on the third pair. I just think they're much like Jackson Blake. I think Rod's going to let him get into the season, and then, as he sees fit, elevate. In which case, I think we're going to see Slavin and Chatfield start together and form what Carolina will have as a truly shutdown defensive pairing off the hop, and then adjust from there. And again, as soon as Nikishin proves that he can handle that, get him going against third and fourth lines, third pair, the bottom of somebody's lineup, to get his confidence up and let him establish himself. Then I think we can mix around. I just think Rod's going to take it slow with it. And I look forward to watching Chatfield play with Slavin. That could be a dynamite.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it'll happen.
Oh, man.
Slavin's going to need someone to play the right side, and it's either going to be him or it's going to be Shane Gostisbehere. And I think
I have Nikishin and Gostisbehere teaming up on a third pair.
Well, we'll see how that holds up. Like
you know things, Corey. You're good at this. You're good at this.
I like of Chatfield being a life preserver for Nikishin.
I do too.
being a life preserver for Miller in what's going to be a transition for both of them.
Yeah.
So and then, you know, to me, if it's a guy that is going to step up into that, John Walker will play. They decide not to use Miller up there. But we'll see. I mean, you're absolutely right that the Slavin Chatfield pairing, I mean, they might only put up 30 combined points, but you know, they would definitely be a lockdown pairing. But I feel like those two guys really help solidify a pairing on their own defensively. So
I think you're right in a lot of ways. I do. If Slavin can play his right side and not drop off, Slavin and Miller would be a pretty phenomenal top pair. Look, when go back a couple of years ago when the Rangers beat the Hurricanes in the playoffs in the second round. I guess second round. Was it second round? Yeah, second round. In my opinion, Miller was their best defenseman. Better than Fox, better than all the other guys they had. I was going to say better than Trouba, but I didn't think Trouba was all that great in that series. I thought Miller was awesome, and that has stayed with me. Last year, none of the Rangers were good except for Artemi Panarin. Everybody else on the roster stunk. The coach wasn't good. The goalie was good, but not as good as he used to be. All right, real quick, I totally lied. Who's assuming it's the Rangers, assuming it's the Devils and the Hurricanes on top of the Metro Division in one way, shape, or form, one or the other. Who's third? Corey?
Oh boy, it's probably Washington, I would think. I don't think Columbus is going to be. I think Columbus's goaltending scares me a little bit. Washington, for whatever reason, seems to have some like magic dust they sprinkle on, you know, Vezina caliber goalies for 1 year. So to me, it's probably Washington, though I think a lot of their flaws were exposed in that playoff series, and the people who didn't see Carolina as a favorite in that series, I'll never. I almost felt like they hadn't watched hockey all season. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's that. I like Columbus. I like a lot of the stuff they have there. I didn't love their off season. Yeah, the moves that Don Waddell made, but I would say probably Washington. Pittsburgh's toast. The Flyers are not going to be good. So yeah, I think Washington.
Matt?
Yeah, unless there's like a huge drop off where Protas remembers that he can't skate and then doesn't score on like a 50-goal pace, and Alex Ovechkin remembers that he's 40-something. I think, you know, it's probably Washington. I could see Columbus again fighting for one of those wild card spots, but at the end of the day, like Corey said, that goaltending situation is just it's not ideal.
No. My heart wants to say Columbus, but I actually think the answer is the Rangers because they've got enough, and their goalie is still about as good as you get. But honestly, I think it's 2 and a gap. So I think for the, you know, however many years in a row, this is probably just 2. I think we'll have 5 teams coming out of the Atlantic making the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. Corey Lavalette, Matt Soma. I appreciate both of you. Corey Lav on Twitter, at Matt Soma 12 on Twitter. He's got a Substack. It's called Matt Substack, right?
Yeah, I'll have a creative name. I'm workshopping something.
That's very creative. The Adam Gold Show. I do a radio show. That's the name. I don't have any fancy name.
There you go. Substack, Matt. Go with that.
Yeah, the Matt Soma Substack.
No, use my name. Call it the Corey Lavalette Substack. That would be better.
Don't do that. Don't
I thank both of you for doing this. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Oh, man, I thank both. That's Corey Lavalette and Matt Soma, and I appreciate them here on the Canes Corner podcast. All right, well, I lied. It wasn't going to be under 30, but we did it under 40. All right, I teased it, and I will tell you that a week from tonight, a conversation with Rod Brindamore will drop. So stay tuned for that. 1 week from tonight, right here on the Canes Corner podcast feed, Rod Brindamore and me in conversation, we will call it. It's going to be wide-ranging on hockey and things. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks, Corey Lavalette and Matt Soma. You should follow them, find them wherever they are. And I will see all of you next week for the head coach, Rod Brindamore. This has been the Canes Corner podcast. You know what I forgot to tell you guys? We're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. It says it right there in the dang on screen. If it's for the exterior of your home, you find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina on Hamlin Road in Durham. No place like it. Sammy Hanna and his crew do a great job. You should check them out for all of your exterior home improvement needs. Until next time, see you.